because of its being embraced by Freemasonry and the Masonic lodges around the world. Here is a picture, actually a drawing, by this African tribe. No one knows how they were able to understand that this star Sirius would have a Sirius B satellite or star circulating or orbiting around it. This is an actual drawing that the Dogon tribe of Africa in Mali and West Africa drew. And yet this has been transmitted to them orally for generations and generations, even before astronomers were able to sight this millions of miles away. Here's a drawing of the strange spacecraft that they said came down from the heavens, and these amphibious beast fish gods fell into the sea and then came up out of and were able to do supernatural acts. And even today the Dogon worship these beings, which they call the Nomo. The Nomo. Here's a picture of Albert Pike. Let me tell you a little bit about Albert Pike, the former Sovereign Grand Commander of Freemasonry. Of course, the house of the temple that he caused to be built is just 13 blocks from the White House. Now, in every temple of the Masons, in every lodge, is, of course, the blazing star of Sirius. Now, Sirius in the Egyptian religion was always worshipped as the great star god who was Lord of the underworld. Isn't that interesting that Masons would worship the same being known as the blazing star? And their pentagram, the pentagram of the planet, the star god Sirius, is found in almost every Masonic lodge today, as well as the great temple of the Mormons in Salt Lake City. Here from France was a movie called Forces Occultes that discussed Masonry and this planet. Now, Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the Egyptians, was thought to be from the planet or the star Sirius. And then we determined that there is another tribe in Africa whose ancient lore and legend told them that there was a god to be worshipped who came from the Eye star, EYE, and had an all-seeing eye. Not too long ago, the Hubble Eye on the Universe, let's just call it, the Space Telescope, gave us this picture. It was in the National Geographic magazine. One wonders if this has something to do with the great eye star known as Sirius. In my book, Tex Barr's Book of New Age Cults and Religions, I actually tell about a New Age occult community, a commune that has been set up called Sirius. Sirius. And they too worship the great deity that came from the planet Sirius. Now it is said that the planet Sirius had an explosion at one time in the history of the world, and a great chunk of it came off. A great, let's just call it satellite. And it was hurled into outer space. And when it came close to this galaxy, there was a mighty explosion. The planet Saturn, they said, was very primary at that time, but it began to recede, to fall. At one time, it is said that the planet Saturn was a second sun of planet Earth, that we were a binary sun, planet, and galaxy. We'll talk about Saturn in just a minute. But first, let's go to the planet Nibiru. Nibiru. So many people are talking about that because a man named Zecharia Sitchin. Here's a copy of his book, by the way, a picture of the front cover, The Lost Book of Enki. But he's also written the 12th Planet and a number of other books. Mr. Sitchin seems to have gained a lot of ground recently. He claims to be a scientist and seems to have credentials. But he says this Nibiru in its orbit will someday come close to Earth again and cause great signs in the heavens and catastrophe here on Earth. Nibiru. One wonders where he got the name Nibiru. And I began to do research on this. I couldn't find it anywhere. You might say on the internet, in any encyclopedia, any book that I was able to discover, no expert that I could talk to, but I found it in the Bible. It tells us that there was a great god worshipped by the Babylonians called Nebo, and he came from a planet known as Nibiru. And the Bible says that in the last days, Nebo, the god of Nibiru, will be made to stoop, and Baal will be made to bow to God. Yes, the great star god Nibiru will have to stoop and worship the true God of the heavens. And that's found in the Bible. You're not going to find it in any occult or Masonic book today, my friends. But you will learn about Nibiru and Nebo, the god of the Babylonians, the star god in the Bible, and the failure that he will be in the last days. Now let's go a little bit further and looking at Nibiru, because Sitchin has gained such popularity, and you need to know about Nibiru. Is it planet X? And what is exactly Nibiru? In his book, The Sirius Mystery, Robert K.G. Temple says that Nibiru is actually a synonym for Horus, the great Egyptian sun god. Lord of the lands, he was called. And Horus also is a synonym for the dog star. And of course, the dog star is what Sirius is called. You may remember the old term, the dog days of summer. This was because it was in the summertime, around July the 21st, when the great dog star would come forth. And the Nile would flood, and people began to talk about how hot and scorched and dry the earth was. And these were the dog days of summer, and that had relation to Sirius, the great dog star. Now, at the same time, Alexander Hislop, in his tremendous classic expose of these star gods and deities called The Two Babylons, wrote this. He, of course, referred to that biblical quote that I mentioned to you. It's found in Isaiah. Baal boweth down, Nebo stoopeth, it says. And it says the word Nebo comes from Nibba, which means to deliver an oracle or to prophesy. In other words, a false prophet. So that Nibiru would be a false prophet of God. I think that's pretty fascinating, don't you? By the way, Nibiru was represented by the little horn, and those who worshipped this great god Nebo, or the star Nibiru, wore a horn headdress. Isn't it interesting that Daniel talks about the little horn of the Antichrist in the last days? So we have the correlation here of Nibiru, who was actually the god Nebo. Now, remember that Temple said that Osiris, the great sun god, and his son Horus are synonyms of Sirius, or the dog star. Now, it's interesting to me that when you go to study Osiris, you have the fact that he is often represented by the letter X. The letter X. Now, in Freemasonry, we have the jewel of a Knight of St. Andrew. That's one of the rituals of Freemasonry, if you get high enough. And there we have the X, the cross that is the X. The order of the Knight of St. Andrew is the X. It is interesting that it is called Planet X that is headed for Earth. By the way, the invention known as the laser, which looks at all of your groceries when you go to the supermarket or the department stores. Here is a picture of the laser light scanner. You'll see this X, and then of course you have the bar coming down the midst of it.